Reports are coming in from around the globe.
Strange metallic objects appearing out of
The
nowhere.
global phenomenon known as the monoliths have experts perplexed. I didn't believe in them at first. Must be some hoax or an art installation. Maybe a stunt to promote a TV show. That is, until one of them appeared in my backyard. Because I made it and put it there. And also it's like 10 inches tall. This is my story. Our story begins when I was shooting a YouTube video. I wanted to make an ornament from an old Christmas tree I had saved, something commemorative of the disaster avalanche of 2020, but nothing too morbid. The monolith phenomenon seemed like the perfect brand of absurdity I was looking for.
From this thing, and it's been drying for 2 years now, 2018. But this is like the worst wood ever.
The trouble with small pine trees is that no matter how long you dry them, they'll always gum up your tools if you don't get all the bark off first.
Like that is just, it's just gross. I don't want to put this anywhere near any of my tools or machines because it's just gonna gum up all my blades and gross.
I had to skip out on the big shop tools for now.
I've got a dirty old hatchet here, and we'll see if we can strip all the bark off of this thing without, cutting off any fingers or toes. Safety first.
So all I had to go on was a hatchet and a dream. With my tree memento newly naked, my next task was to cut it into a triangular prism. I didn't want anything rolling around as I cut it, so the first thing was to hand plane one side enough so I could run it safely through the bandsaw.
Take a big sip and then do that. Cut. Don't forget, kids, like and subscribe.
Safest bet is to start with a hand tool or some way to get a nice flat surface, and then use that to make a perpendicular surface on the other side. From there, you can do whatever you want.
The table saw did most of the remaining tree removal services, ripping the round into a square, and then as close to an equilateral triangle as I could safely manage. For the rest of the fine-tuning, I went back to the hand plane.
Shiny though.
Beautiful.
I learned two very important lessons at this point.
That's what I wanted. Gross.
One, Christmas tree pine is extremely knotty and nearly impossible to plane. And two, I was probably better off just cutting the whole thing to final dimensions with the table saw in the first place, considering what I was going to do next.
Okay, so I made this cool.
At this point, I figured I would just paint it silver and be done with it. Yes, a wooden Christmas tree ornament. But then I thought,
This would look really cool if it was made out of metal, like the real things. And so
that's what I set out to do. One thing I have to tell you folks is that you should not try to cut or bend sheet metal without wearing gloves. I definitely should have, and fortunately, I came out of it unscathed. But metal is sharp, and you are soft, and the last thing any of us want during the holidays is a trip to the emergency room to stitch our bits back together. I cut the sheet metal so that I could fold it around the 3 sides of the wooden core with a little bit of overlap. Bending and creasing the corners was tricky, but some clever folding and pressing with scrap wood did the trick. Next, I separated the ends into triangles so they could be folded over. Only the last fold needs to be perfect, since that's the only one anyone was ever going to see. At this point, I wasn't certain how I was going to hold it all together. I'm not a welder, and I didn't think it would be a good idea to solder it with the wooden core. I briefly considered rivets or nails, but that would ruin the sleek profile I was going for. I knew superglue could hold brass and acrylic in small applications, so I figured that if I roughed up the surfaces, it would hold aluminum just fine. Well, that didn't work. Let's do the same thing and hope for a different result. Okay, well, now it's epoxy time. I'm no epoxy god like Peter Brown, but I was fairly certain this poor attempt would hold much better. The only reason I didn't do it sooner is because I had to go to the store and I'm lazy, and I didn't want to. One hour later, everything is holding nicely. I scraped off the excess epoxy with one of my sharp chisels, which hates me now for what I put her through. Sorry, baby, I'll never do it again. Then I sanded the whole thing ruthlessly through 180, 220, and 400 grit. I finished it off with a few gentle caresses from a clump of 4/0 steel wool. Finally, an eye hook in one end to attach a ribbon for hanging on our next tree. Which brings us to today, where I have this beautiful triangle of metal wrapped around a hunk of wood that I let live in my house 2 years ago. I could hang on to it as a family heirloom and a reminder that 2020 wasn't all bad. Some of it was downright creepy and strange. Indeed, making ornaments out of Christmas trees past can be a great family tradition if you're willing to put up with the sap and the knots. But I have another idea. If this video gets 1,000 likes by the end of December, I'll ship this monolith all the way to Melbourne, Australia, so I Did a Thing can stop whining about his monolith which he lost in a park somewhere. If you like this content, leave a like and subscribe, and follow me on Instagram and Twitter @LauerArtworks. Yeah, that's it. That's a monolith.
Hey, pretty bird.